Hello and welcome to Dialogue. With both Israel and Hamas confirming the first phase of a Gaza ceasefire agreement, there is finally a moment of respite after more than 2 years of devastating conflict. While lasting peace remains uncertain, this breakthrough has been widely welcomed by the international community. So how will the initial agreement be implemented and what challenges lie ahead? And who will take the lead in rebuilding and governing Gaza after the war? Join us for our discussion today, live from Beijing. I'm Xu Qinduo. Joining me today are Professor Sultan Barakat at Hamad Bin Khalifa University in Doha, Qatar, Anton Fedyashin, Associate Professor at American University, and Wenping, Senior Research Fellow at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Well, let's start with Professor Barakat. What's if you take a look at the initial ceasefire, what do you make of it? Do you see that as the start of a long-term ceasefire, or is it just a temporary respite?
Well, it's certainly perceived, at least by the Palestinians, as the beginning of a permanent ceasefire. Hamas was very clear from the very beginning that this should be the end of the war. And I think most stakeholders at the moment perceive it as such. This, of course, doesn't mean that Israel will necessarily respect that. And there is still a good chance that after the release of the captives, they may return to war. But at the moment, everyone, the mediators, the main Arab and Muslim countries that have been in dialogue with President Trump, and I think to some extent even President Trump himself, is interested in this being the end of the war, for a number of reasons that we can maybe discuss later on. But the hope is that it will continue and it will lead to an environment where further discussion can take place on the very important long-term issues, not all of which have been agreed, despite the fact that they were included in the 20-point plan. I think the compromise that happened over the last few days is that they decided to phase the plan. And now they enter the so-called phase one, which will deliver the ceasefire in return for the captives and the Palestinian prisoners held by Israel.
Mm-hmm. Wenping, of course, we know that most to happen during this phase one of the peace deal is about exchange for hostages and prisoners, and also Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. What do you see as the potential challenges, during this implementation?
Okay. First of all, I think this is a really good news for not only for the people in Gaza, also for those family of those hostages. I think 2 years, such a long time, and lots of people died, and especially those people in Gaza, you see how many people died, and also hostages. That's unbelievable. Those suffering has been caged. So I think definitely is a good news. Of course, when we look upon the challenge, this is just the phase one. Even though the phase one cannot guarantee it can be implemented in a very smooth way. For example, now 3 days will be counted, and then this exchange of a prisoner and those hostages. So if anything not being taken in a good way, maybe immediately being stopped. So now even the UN Chief Secretary General Guterres has also mentioned number one, those respect for all those hostages should be guaranteed. Yeah, in what kind of condition those hostages? I think they'll be very weak physically, and then how to transfer them home back to their family member. So in what way? So this also needs a detail, those arrangement, and then those people prisoner transfer back to Palestinian to Palestinian people, their family. That's another challenge. Now I heard a lot of conservative opinion coming from Israel saying, wow, this is a bad idea because those people has been put in the death penalty, lifelong in jail in Israel, and then also some even directly engaged with those 2 years, this October 7th, those attack to Israel. So they are not happy at all. The same those terrorists now being sent back and then in the future they will make another terror attack to Israel. So that's not a good idea for Israel. So I think all those elements will make like even time bomb along the way. Not to mention those phase 2 or phase 3, because all the phase 2, phase 3, all depended on the phase 1 can be implemented in a very smooth way. Plus another issue, that is Israel troops. They withdraw to where? Actually not detailedly mentioned. Just they withdraw to somewhere mutually agreed upon. Even not show up the map. Let all us to see by where Israel's troops has been withdrawn. And then humanitarian access to those people now in Hungary while they are starving. And then saying if Israel remain in control, those sometimes saying by mistake, shooting down those press people, even doctor and the hospital, may also happening again. Anything if happening again, that will cause this very big trouble for this phase 1 implementation. So a lot of challenges.
It's still we say it's a kind of a fragile. And Hamas has been demanding that there is a guarantee, security guarantee, or a promise should be made good that Israel will withdraw its forces from the Gaza Strip there. Do you think the U.S. will act as one of the guarantor, probably the most powerful guarantor, that will happen according to the schedule?
The schedule isn't even clear yet, Sindhu, and I think that's where we're going to run into problems. I am very optimistic about the event we are talking about right now, and by event I mean the potential exchange of the hostages at the end of 3 days. But let's remember that this event, which will be easy to track, and we will see this on our television screens, is also part of a process. And it's the process, the larger process, the implementation of the withdrawal, for example, that will be the biggest problem. Donald Trump's record says clearly that he will be taking Israel's side. So what the Israelis will consider in their national interest is what the United States is most likely to support. On the other hand, Donald Trump has just committed himself very publicly to this peace, which tells us that his desire to receive a Nobel Peace Prize will work against his commitment to Israel. So it'll be very interesting to see how he navigates between the Scylla and Charybdis of this conflict. I have a feeling that his commitment to overall peace will actually encourage him to support at least a modicum of Palestinian requirements. However, one of the things that is missing from the 20-point agreement is the question of the Palestinian state. And the Israeli government of Benjamin Netanyahu has already stated publicly that the Palestinian state is not an option. If that is the problem, unfortunately, we are looking at a frozen conflict, a suspension of hostilities at best, which is very good news for people on the ground, but we're not addressing the fundamental problem that has been plaguing this region for over half a century, and that is the question of a Palestinian state, of a two-state solution, and that has been explicitly left out of the 20-point plan.
Well, Professor Barakat, the U.S. is moving up to 200 troops already based in the region to Israel to establish a reported civil military coordination center. Also joining the U.S. troops will be contribution from countries like Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey. Those forces will oversee the progress of a ceasefire agreement and report any violations by any sides. So are you confident that the initial phase, the ceasefire will be implemented, will be enforced faithfully by both sides? And then, as you said, that will lay a foundation, a solid foundation for next and the further, probably more challenging stages of this peace agreement.
Yeah, I think the important factors that have maybe changed a little bit over the last couple of weeks and have led us to where we are today include, one, the engagement of Turkey in the mediation team. Turkey was not there in the first place. Now their role is important because they can also offer support to the Palestinians. They have a leverage over Hamas to some extent, and whatever the future of Hamas is to be, Turkey could also be an option for them if they had to move out of Doha. The second, I think, and it's very important, that was referred to earlier, is Trump publicly now acting as the guarantor. He has put a lot of his credibility on the line, regardless whether he's going to get the Nobel Prize or not, although that may be part of his motivation. He's really doing this not because he loves the Palestinians or because he has revisited his priorities. He's doing this to be able to save Israel. Israel now has reached absolute bottom in terms of its international legitimacy as a result of this genocide in Gaza. And you could see this very, very clearly during the United Nations Security General Assembly meetings and the events that have followed. And I think the American administration is very aware of the fact that any further into this, any further negative progress will lead to really challenging the very existence of Israel that they would love to protect. So he's doing this out of wanting to help them out, and I hope the Israelis will listen to him carefully and not be distracted by the extreme elements within the government and Netanyahu. Now, having said that, the implementation in terms of the exchanges is straightforward, because that is most likely be moved or given to the ICRC to manage. And ICRC has a good experience in doing this sort of work, and all they need is the secure environment, which is mostly in the hand of Israel. So Israel has got to stop bombing. Now, up until the cabinet meeting, Security Cabinet in Tel Aviv meeting, they have not stopped, and they continue to bomb randomly in Gaza, which has made the situation very, very complex. Now, that completed, I think, will create a mini environment where other things can be talked about. And the presence of these various troops on the ground is important, but it's also important not to be seen as a force to manage the occupation, to actually demobilize Hamas and so on. They have to be seen as a force to protect the Palestinians who have been the victims of this war, and then build on that to hopefully reach the two-state solution, whether Netanyahu likes it or not. I think the world opinion, and maybe many in Israel at the moment, have come to realize that occupation is corrupting. It has corrupted the very nature of Israeli society, and it is not sustainable. They cannot continue occupying a population that is now almost equal in number and pretend that things are normal and we can move forward. And I hope this is one of the main changes that we will see in the months to come, having maybe brought an end to this particular episode of the conflict between the Palestinians and Israelis.
Mm-hmm. Professor Barakat, you mentioned about two-state solution, but what we heard from the current U.S. administration is like there's very few times, if there's any, mention of two-state solution. Well, the rest of the world, the international community, remains committed to such a solution. People say that's the only solution to a lasting peace in this region. Are you confident that we are still on track for two-state solution?
I think the two-state solution was very much part of the initial plan that was presented to Trump by the Arab and Muslim states. But then over the weekend, where he met with Netanyahu and Netanyahu met his team and so on, things were tickled a little bit and changed. And that is what we heard, Netanyahu insisting that there will be no state, no Palestinian state, etc., came as a result of that. But I think the international will is for a two-state solution. The only response for stabilization in the region is to allow the Palestinians their right in having their own independent state. Now, the borders and the boundaries of that state may be negotiated, as some leaders from the Arab world referred to during the United Nations General Assembly. If you notice, they did not talk again about 1967 border, but they talked about negotiated borders. So there may be some land swap between Israel and the Palestinians, but everybody now is focused on the idea of a two-state solution. Anything short of that will create another Hamas. Even if Israel was able to demobilize this Hamas, something else will come up. Mm-hmm. If nothing, it will come up from the children of the victims. Almost, we talk about, we know for sure around 70,000 people killed, possibly many more. Those people who have now a new level of grievances that did not exist 2 years ago. And they will come and they will want to demand, they will demand justice, and they will go after their rights. And we will go back again and again to these cycles of confrontations.
Right, the cycle there. Wenping, just as you said, it's fragile there. And then what do we need to do beyond this first phase ceasefire? I think a lot of you agree, yes, exchanges of prisoners, hostages, probably easy, good news. But then next stage could be difficult, including the withdrawal of Israeli troops and, of course, demilitarization of Hamas, future governance, etc. What do we need to do? Do you think this is key probably element or key factors that should be done properly to ensure, there is a lasting peace?
Yes, that's most challenging part, I think, is phase 2, because this is transition from smooth implementation of this phase 1, and then certainly we'll come to the phase 2, that is who will govern Gaza. Because before, in terms of Israel's perspective, there's no, any, even zero possibility this Hamas will remain in power. Even saying they cannot be allowed to stay in Gaza, this territory. Mm-hmm. You have to be living. I even can give you access. I will not kill you, but you have to leave. So give you safety access to out of Gaza. So this is the thing. Netanyahu government has been keep talking, saying destroy Hamas, not make this, 2 years tragedy happen again. As long as Hamas there's no safety for Israel. So now I think the Hamas, like our colleagues just mentioned, if now the name called Hamas people now living, but maybe another name, just give another name. And then, but also they want to defend their own statehood. They want to create their own statehood, and then they have their own rights to live in that territory. That's their home. So doesn't matter what kind of name. I think the key issue is to safeguard the people there. Give them the chance, give them the hope to live on their own territory, and then to build on their own statehood. You see, before they insisted on to build the statehood, the border is the 1967, that war. But now even somehow we see becoming flexible, saying negotiated border. Wow, that's a big, I think, this negotiable, this tone, no longer that tough as before, now it's softened. I think now there's another historical chance. Now we heard from Donald Trump, this 20 points plan saying no Hamas will be there in the picture. Okay, no Israel, those are also in the picture. There will be some international, how to say, force, technical, this personal, not a military guy. And then even people mentioned Tony Blair, or maybe will be the person in charge. Well, Tony Blair used to be the mediator in charge of Middle East, affair. But we all know he ended up in everything is failure when he have this kind of title, saying envoy of Middle East. Actually, he even hasn't been on that territory. By himself, set foot there, talk with the people around. So it's quite doubtful. Tony Blair can lead the way forward. He is the very suitable person in charge. And then we see how will be those kind of a commission. This peace called the Peace Committee. This mission will be in charge, serving as the transitional administrative this agency. So that is another question mark. Yeah, who will be in that committee, and then coming from which country is easily really hands off, or just in charge behind the screen. Who knows? Because as long as the military, those troops are there, wow, guns speaks louder than the words.
Right. So there's a couple of question marks, to say the least, right? Uncertainty there. Well, one, probably that requires, in a sense, more, commitment from the U.S., especially, President Trump himself. Anton, how do you see President Trump's personal role in achieving the ceasefire, temporary ceasefire? Something his predecessor, Joe Biden, failed to achieve. Why Trump is able to pull it off?
Well, Joe Biden failed to achieve it because he was distracted by the campaign. And of course, it took Trump almost a year after he got into power to bring Israel and Hamas to this point. But for Trump, this is a question of personal prestige. He is really gunning for the Nobel Peace Prize, which for some reason that, to be frank, is absolutely beyond me. He believes that this will somehow bolster his domestic and international position. Americans, by and large, do not vote on foreign policy issues unless they are an immediate threat, such as, during World War II, but that's not the situation where the United States is right now. So I think this is, for Trump, more a question of reputation. He will, if he gets a Nobel Peace Prize, which, by the way, is an open question, he will be the fifth president to receive it. And his predecessors are towering political figures. Exactly 120 years ago in 1905, Theodore Roosevelt helped mediate the Peace of Portsmouth between Russia and Japan. He got a Peace Prize for that in 1906. Then Woodrow Wilson received one. Jimmy Carter received one, albeit not for what he did as president, but for his enormous activity in favor of world peace after he was defeated by Reagan. And then, of course, Barack Obama. All of these decisions were more or less controversial. Jimmy Carter is the least so, by the way, simply because of how committed he was to peace, including in the Middle East, by the way. But Barack Obama, of course, received the Nobel Peace Prize more as a reaction to George W. Bush's presidency and the invasion of Iraq than anything else. He was in the middle of two wars while he received it, and then surged the troops in Afghanistan. So, the history of this question when it comes to American presidents has been controversial. I don't think Trump's receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, should it happen, which, again, is still a big question, is going to be equally as controversial. But for him himself, someone who absolutely loves everything that is colored gold, and that's what the medal is, I think this is more personal prestige. Now, mind you, if this works out for the Palestinian people, even in the short term, then great for everyone. But again, I want to stress what I mentioned before, and it sounds like my colleagues agree with me, that until the fundamental issue of a two-state solution is addressed, we're simply freezing a conflict, which in itself is good, but we're not solving the problem for the generations to come.
Mm-hmm. Well, Professor Barakat, there are Arab countries involved in the whole process, such as, Qatar, Turkey, Egypt. Do you think President Trump also, or do you think they have the heirs of President Trump in terms of the importance of independent, let's say, Palestinian statehood and a two-state solution? And if, really the question would be, of course, we know that it's already announced that the Nobel Peace Prize was given to someone else, not Trump. Could that affect his motivation to continue pushing for peace?
Yes, we should remember that when we had the last ceasefire in Gaza, it was because of Trump in January of early this year. It was finally balanced so that it was announced on the day Biden finished his role and Trump was coming in, and both presidents took some credit for it. But it was really driven by the strength of Trump, who came across as a much more determined and much more able to bully everyone compared to Biden. And it was clear that he demanded Netanyahu to stop. Now, the fact that Netanyahu couldn't maintain it and then went back to war and Trump, turned a blind eye for such a long time is one thing. But things came to head when Netanyahu went as far as bombing Doha. His attempt to kill the negotiators and what it led to of a breach to the Qatari sovereignty in the presence of the Americans in Doha, with the largest base and everything else, that caused a lot of embarrassment to the administration and to Trump in particular, particularly given that it happened only a few weeks after he made his grand tour of the Gulf states and so on. And he's given lots of guarantees for their stability and security. And then this thing happened. Now, they were very smart. They mobilized the Muslim and the Arab world very quickly. And they started to speak to Trump in one united voice about the need to have a political horizon for this issue, the need to stop the war immediately. And at the end of it, there will be a lot of reward. At the personal level, everyone is going to support him to get this Nobel Peace Prize because for one reason or the other, his ego needs it. And it's fine. I think he should take it if that would save people's lives. And the second, because of his invested economic interest in the region and across the Muslim world, he started, I think, to see much better now that Israel, as an advanced, if you like, front line of the United States, is not really meeting the full objectives of the United States, particularly on the economic front when it comes to the bigger deals that he's been discussing in the Middle East. And these are part of the motivations, I think, that make him now concentrate his mind on trying to resolve this issue one way or the other. And of course, what he's promising Israel is one, a restoration of its international standing. And he said that publicly, that he will work very hard to try and get other countries to forget and forgive and move forward. Netanyahu has demanded very clearly amnesty to himself and the other Israelis from the International Court of Justice and from ICC. Of course, he put that as a condition on allowing the Palestinian administration a future role in the administration of Gaza. But he knows that this is not in the hand of the Palestinians. This is an international issue. And I think the only way for us to make sure that Trump remains committed and as such keeping Netanyahu on the lead is to keep the pressure. The international community pressure is very, very important. What happened over the last few weeks, including very importantly the recognition of the state of Palestine by France and then Britain, all of that has added to the level of pressure on Israel, which we started to see the result of. I think any relief in that, and this is what I fear about this ceasefire, that Trump and maybe Netanyahu will try and present it as a way to allow the others to relax a little bit, will allow Netanyahu a free hand. And we should not do that. And I hope, and I keep saying this every time I appear on China TV, that China could play a more active role in this. I mean, this is the main missing point at the moment in terms of the balance of powers around the Security Council and the Palestinian issue.
Okay. On that note, we are coming to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also watch us on the CGTN app on YouTube. Thank you for being with us. I'm Qu Qinduo. See you next time.